Hi guys, Claudia here, and today we're going to talk about the 18th of May 1536. So yesterday we had the tragic executions of George Boleyn, Mark Smeaton, Henry Norris, Francis Weston and William Brereton. Anne was told that she was due to die today, and so she was readying herself for that. So she spent last night praying with her almoner, trying to get herself ready spiritually and mentally to die. So Joanna Denny tells us that she then sent a message to William Kingston, the Constable of the Tower, and asked him to take communion with her. So communion is a Christian sacrament in which you have bread and wine, and you'd usually do this with someone else, you'd share it with someone. You might be wondering why Anne is doing this, considering she is a reformer, what will later be known as a Protestant, instead of a Catholic, but actually both Protestants and Catholics take communion. Catholics take communion more frequently. With Protestants it seems to be at moments of great importance, because with the Roman Catholics they believed that the bread and the wine transformed in essence into the blood and body of Christ, whereas the Reformers and the Protestants believed this was more metaphorical and symbolic. Then what Anne does is she swears on the sacrament, and this is exactly what George did to show that he was innocent, because if you were to lie on the sacrament, then your immortal soul would be in peril and you might end up going to hell. It was important to Anne that Kingston saw her doing this so that he could see that she was maintaining her innocence. So in a letter that Kingston writes to Cromwell on the 18th, he says, "This morning she sent for me, that I might be with her at such a time as she received the good Lord, to the intent I should hear her speak as touching her innocency, always to be clear." So Anne wants it to be public knowledge that she is maintaining her innocence right up until her final moments. Something else Anne is sorting out is alms for her execution. This is something customary that happens at executions like this. So the king is allowing Anne to have £20, and when she goes to her execution she will distribute this to the poor. So Anne believes that her execution is going to happen at 9 o'clock. So she's been preparing for this, like I said, with her almoner. She's been praying, and psychologically you can imagine how incredibly difficult that must be to prepare yourself to get into that zone in which you're able to go to that scaffold and not run away, to actually ready yourself to stand there and just let it happen. So Kingston left Anne for a while to prepare, so she would have got herself dressed, got herself ready spiritually. But when he came back, he had some devastating news for her, and this is that her executioner, the French swordsman from Calais, had been waylaid. So her execution would actually take place 3 hours later. It had been moved to 12 o'clock noon. Now this is a horrible shock for Anne, because she's made herself ready to be executed, and now she knows she's got to do that all over again. This is her response to Master Kingston. "Master Kingston, I hear say I shall not die afore noon, and I am very sorry therefore, for I thought to be dead by this time and past my pain. I have heard say the executioner was very good, and I have a little neck." And then she began laughing heartily. So she says that she's sorry to hear this because she thought to be dead and past her pain by 12 o'clock. She thought by then her ordeal would be over and she would be with God. Remember that along with the terror that Anne is facing for herself, because she's going to have to go and be murdered, she's also grieving. She's grieving for George and she's grieving for her friends. No doubt she'll also be grieving her relationship with Elizabeth, because she's never going to see her daughter again, and she can't protect Elizabeth once she's dead. She doesn't know how the king is going to treat Elizabeth. She doesn't know who's going to stand by her. So Anne's comment about her little neck is often used in adaptations, in films and media, because it's very characteristic of her. It really does give you a sense of her personality. You know, it is dark humour, and that is a very human and relatable way that some of us deal with situations that are very traumatic. Also, this laughter, I think, shows her mental trauma. It's like she's almost got past a place of understanding and she's now moved through that into a sort of hysteria where nothing feels real anymore. She's completely detached from herself. You know, there's no good Anne trying to ground herself and find sense in this situation. The only thing she can find sense in is her religion, because the situation itself doesn't make any sense. It's completely topsy-turvy. There's no justice to it, it's not logical. Some people have used the idea of her laughing heartily as telling us that she's starting to go mad, but actually I think it's the opposite. I think probably she is a sane person waking up and realising that the system around her is mad. It's the system that's wrong. But there's nothing Anne can do, so she waits for midday and she readies herself all over again. So this time when Kingston comes to see her, she's obviously hoping that Kingston is coming to lead her to her death and that it will all be over. But unfortunately we have another issue. Kingston informs her that the executioner has still not arrived, and that means her execution won't take place today at all. It will take place tomorrow on the 19th of May in the morning. So we have Anne's response to this second huge and traumatic disappointment in a letter that Kingston writes to Cromwell. Now, something else that Kingston is thinking about, because we've spoken about him quite a lot, he's a strange, morbid figure who likes things to be done well. He wants this whole process of execution to run smoothly. But his concern is that public opinion is now turning to Anne's side, and he's worried that the Tower won't be able to handle it, that their security won't be able to handle it, because there could be riots, there could be protests. They've never executed a Queen of England before. So he writes to Cromwell that he is afraid that she will declare herself to be a good woman for all men but the king at the hour of her death. I have seen men and also women executed, and they have been in great sorrow, but to my knowledge this lady has much joy and pleasure in death. So as strange as it sounds, Anne just wants this to be over. What she wants most of all is for it to happen, for it to be clean, and for her to go to her paradise, to be with her God, to be with her brother and her friends. You know, it's interesting that Kingston tells us that a lot of people he's seen waiting for execution are so sorrowful, and I think that shows us that Anne is grieving at this point. She is grieving for George. And again, I think in Anne's dark humour we can see psychologically a sense of detachment, and I think that's quite normal and quite common for people in traumatic situations. You might be able to relate to that on a lesser scale, but when you've been through something particularly traumatic in your life, sometimes as a defence mechanism, your body and your mind can sort of detach you from events, so you feel like an outsider, like it's not real. Now, something interesting we have happening here is because of Kingston's warning to Cromwell that they're not sure that the Tower security can handle protests and riots, and he's very concerned about that. Because of that, Cromwell decides that they're going to try and send all foreigners away from the Tower. Now, this is because they don't want any foreign press getting back to other countries, because they believe that they will be able to see through this and they might be sympathetic to Anne when they report it. They don't want this. They want this to be propaganda for the king. They can't have people feeling sorry for Anne. They want to try and control exactly what gets out there to other countries. Now, we also have Eustace Chapuis telling us about Anne's reaction to her execution being delayed to tomorrow. So he says, "When the command came to put off the execution till today, Anne appeared very sorry, praying the captain of the Tower that for the honour of God he would beg the king that since she was in a good state and disposed for death, she might be dispatched immediately." Now, I think this is so sad that Anne is in such a place of psychological torture that she's now begging the king, who is essentially her murderer, who has turned on her, to please allow her to die quickly, to not draw this out, to not make her sit and wait for her death. And then we have Lancelot de Carles, who's another source, and he says that it was not that she desired death, but thought herself prepared to die, and feared that delay would weaken her. Now, I believe that the Tudors TV show with Natalie Dormer as Anne actually has her saying this in the show. And it is that sense of having to build yourself up, to hype yourself up, to do something terrifying and horrific. You know, it takes a lot to reach that state of courage, and I don't know if many of us could even imagine that level of fear. You have got to prepare yourself to kneel on that scaffold and let yourself be killed, and that takes enormous strength, because as I said before, the human instinct would be to get up and run and yell and tell people that you're innocent and this can't happen. Anne knows that she's got to be dignified if this is going to be a clean death, and she doesn't want to make this any worse for Elizabeth. Nobody that's executed as a traitor can speak out too much, because their families will suffer. The king will punish their families. De Carles also tells us that apparently Anne consoled her ladies several times, telling them that was not a thing to be regretted by Christians, and she hoped to be quit of all unhappiness, with various other good counsels. Now remember, these ladies have been placed there for a reason. They're not friends of Anne, they are there to report on her, but even they feel such pity for her and are moved by this and seem to believe that she's innocent now because they've seen her swear on the sacrament. They seem to be more upset than she is, that this execution isn't going smoothly and that she has to suffer this extra psychological torture. It's so strange that Anne seems to be the one consoling them, that it's okay because she's a Christian and she doesn't fear death because she knows that she'll meet God at the end of it. Now, another instance of Anne using dark humour to try and deal with this horrific situation for another day is something that she said to her ladies. So she laughed and joked with them and told them that by tomorrow she will be referred to as Queen Anne Lackhead. So I think in these sources that we have about Anne at this time, we are seeing a very human response. These two conflicting feelings. Got the very human, very mortal fear of death, and the pain of execution, and the idea that maybe it won't go smoothly, maybe it might not be instant, it might be very painful, but also that's conflicting with Anne's religious beliefs, because she does believe, as she said yesterday, that she will soon be in the presence of that great king. She will be with George, she will be with the other men because they're innocent, maybe not Mark Smeaton, she fears for his soul, but that she will be with God, so she will get to paradise. Now, historians don't know for sure why the execution was delayed, so there's different ideas about this. It could have been a punishment from Henry VIII, some people think. It could be that the executioner really was waylaid for some reason. There were the concerns about protests that I told you about that William Kingston has. It might be that they wanted to try and sort out their security because they were scared of riots. But it could also be that the king wants this marriage to Anne to be judged as invalid before she is killed, and these proceedings are happening at the same time that Anne is in the Tower. So it's Thomas Cranmer, who was a friend of Anne's, who this falls to. He has to do this. He is having to finalise these arrangements to make her marriage null and void. Now, we don't know for certain, but as I've mentioned before, we think the reason it was able to be called invalid is that the king had slept with Mary Boleyn. Okay, thank you for watching. We have one more video to go in this series. Tomorrow it is Anne's execution, so I will be making a usual video for you about that, and I'm also going to be sharing with you a track that I've been working on with a friend called Tudor Acid, and it's dedicated to Anne, and it's about her last walk to the scaffold, so that will be up on this channel tomorrow for you. Okay, I love you loads, I hope you're keeping well, please stay safe. Okay, love you, bye!